Hey, welcome to Two Old Geeks. I'm Rob,
I'm Trace.
and today's episode we'll be talking about Transmetropolitan. So, you never really got too much into Transmetropolitan.
Yeah, I mean that's a deep cut. What I mean by that I mean you got your mainline comic book characters, but you got to be a hardcore comic fan,
Right.
to understand Transmetropolitan.
I think I can explain why you didn't get into it a little better here in a little bit. So, for you geeks who don't know what Transmetropolitan is, it's a comic book that was written back in 1997 and ran till 2002. It only had 60 issues. Now, it was written by Warren Ellis. Anybody that's a comic book fan knows Warren Ellis. It was also illustrated and helped written by Derek Robertson. Have you?
I'm a huge fan of Derek Robinson's
I
art.
tell you what. Now we'll get into
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
in a
we'll
little
get
bit.
into that later.
Yeah, right. So it was published by DC Comics. Now here's why I think it's hard for a lot of people to get into. It first started out in a group called a Helix Comics. It was a group of comics. It was kind of like a futuristic, like a look into the future. And after that, they closed. DC decided to close the Helix thing, but the Transmetropolitan had enough following that they've decided to go ahead and move it over to Vertigo. Now, when Vertigo picked it up, what Helix done and what Warren Ellis was doing was basically just setting up a character, setting up a world. Robertson was sitting there designing a world, drawing a world, but it really wasn't until about the 13th issue that they actually started a deep story with a long arc. And so the other ones were like short stories, something quick and easy. And I think that's why a lot of people, once they get into a few issues, are kind of like, meh. It looks good. It's cool. It's neat. But it's not until you get to the 13th that it really hooks you.
Yeah, you were huge into it.
Oh, yeah.
And we try to share the same interest. Sometimes we do, oftentimes we do, sometimes we don't. So you lent me the first trade paperback.
Yeah, it's probably this one here.
Yeah, maybe the first two. And I read it, and I love Derek Robinson. Is that his name? I love his art. And he did all the art on The Boys, and with Garth Ennis, those comics, which is now an Amazon Prime show. And believe it or not, Derek Robinson has one of my favorite. He does one of my favorite versions of Conan. I love his version of Conan. I'm a huge Conan fan, but I like the comic, but I didn't like it as much as you.
Right.
I like this. I like the art. I like the cyberpunk aspect of it. I think cyberpunk is really going to take off in the future. I think superhero movies are kind of going to go by the wayside, but your Blade Runner-esque, Matrix X, Transmetropolitan. There's a new game coming out called Cyberpunk 2077. Right. I think that cyberpunk, the way that people deal with media today and the way people are attached to their phones, like they are their arms, that the cyberpunk's really going to take off in the future. So I like that aspect of it.
Now, for those who don't know, the main character is Spider Jerusalem. Yeah, there's also Yelena Roslin, Channing Yarrow, and his editor Mitchell Ross. Spider Jerusalem, when Warren Ellis was writing him, he kind of used Hunter Thompson. You know who Hunter Thompson is?
Yeah, I've actually seen some interviews. He was like a political writer back in the 60s or 70s. Right. He came out with a few books. He's kind of anti-government.
Right.
Was what kind of counterculture.
They call them gonzo reporters. And I call them more like guerrilla warriors. They're kind of like almost going into battle against political stuff and things like that. But there's such similarities between Thompson and Spider that, at one point they both end up bald. Thompson called Nixon a monster, while Spider called the president the Beast. So I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but not so much that you just look like you're looking at an adaptation of Thompson's life.
I always thought in the first issue, before Spider Jerusalem shaved, he kind of looked like Alan Moore.
Right.
Then after he shaved, he looked like Grant Morrison, which are buddies of Warren Ellis. So I wonder if he hadn't done that on purpose.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised how many people comment on these comic books on the back of them and inside of them, epilogues and stuff. Come to find out, Patrick Stewart actually wrote a whole big epilogue before it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's like one of the biggest fans of it. It's kind of amazing how many people were into this back when it was just getting started. What I liked about it is the way that Roberts would build a world. Ellis honed it. And it was in the future, and in this future, you could have anything you wanted. It was all at your fingertips, but yet everybody felt like they had nothing. It was amazing to me, and it's almost like, although they had it all, they were just slowly destroying themselves and the world around them with drugs and sex and everything else.
They say that, I've read that, the Transmetropolitan comic series is more relevant today than it was when it come out.
Well, it's almost, okay, so here's the thing. Spider Jerusalem, his main goal was to find what he considered the truth. We all have our own truths, but that's the premise of the story starting out. He goes off and hides himself in a mountain because 5 years earlier he'd come out with a book, made himself super popular, and it felt like it was keeping him from getting to the truth. Then his editors call him and say, hey, you still owe us 2 books. So he has to come down the mountain that he was hiding on to...
Like George R.R. Martin.
Right. So one book he decides to make of all his short articles, and then another one he writes a book. I think it's called I Hate It Here, which is pretty cool. And the city itself, I told you, he runs away from the city, has to go back to the city. The city in itself is almost like a character in itself. We mentioned other characters, but that city is like a living entity. And some of the things that some of the characters have to go through, like his first assistant, he calls them his filthy assistants. She's engaged to this one guy, and he ends up deciding to join into this religious thing and dumps his whole being into a thing called foglets. It's like these little nanonites that just floats around in a big pink cloud that can create anything. And so she kind of loses it because she lost him. She literally sat there and watched it happen. And so she ended up becoming a nun. But she comes back later on. He gets another assistant, Channing, which Ross says, hey, this is my niece, take it easy on her, because he's a big prick to everybody. Plus, he didn't care for her that he wouldn't, like the first assistant. And what's crazy is to see her evolution throughout the comics, because she slowly becomes a female Spider Jerusalem. And by the end of it, she's just like almost identical to the type of personality he is.
Well, the problem I had with it, and probably the reason I didn't go past the first or second trade paperback, is it's really anti-culture is the way I interpreted it.
Okay.
Which I can see why it would be popular today, but you had, there was like, police are bad, police brutality, religion is bad, only atheism is the best religion. You had anti-government, like commercialism's bad. And, so it was like anti-everything. And that's why I say it's more relevant today, because when I get on social media today, everybody is anti-everything. And so I don't really relate with social media today, because I like capitalism, and I like religion, and I like the country. And so I really don't fit in too well. And so with the comic, since he was against everything, I guess that was kind of a turn off from me. So
Yeah, but it's almost a foresight of what we are in now.
Yes,
And
that's
the thing,
true.
And the thing is, and it also shows you that one person's actions can cause a giant ripple and cause other effects, which we won't get into because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. And at the time, you talked about politics. It was kind of like choosing the worst of two evils, and we've been there.
Yeah, we'll be
in the
there
past,
again.
and we'll be there again.
Yeah.
So let me show you some of the things that I've got throughout the years. The thing is business only had a 60-issue thing. There's not a whole lot of merch to be out. So years ago, one of the first things I got was these sunglasses, because this is kind of like his trademark thing.
It's iconic, right?
Right. He had a maker create these things, and they basically record video, and I've never had them on but one time because they don't fit my fat head.
Yeah, I'm not gonna put them on either.
No, go ahead.
I got a fat head too.
Try. I want to see what they look on you.
Not quite as big as yours, but it's pretty good size.
Yeah. Yep. See? So I got these years ago, and I've always just kind of had them sitting up on the shelf, just kind of a thing, So then I got this action figure. And now the reason I liked it is because it showed all his different tattoos. Once he first ended up stepping into what was considered, I thought was a shower, but it basically cleaned him of all his hair and everything. You could see all the tattoos he had all over his body. And it's cool that Robertson actually had a action figure that he drew all the tattoos on. So when he illustrated the comic book, he would actually know what.
I was in
How
a
to keep
bar
it.
in Lexington during Comic-Con
Right.
A couple years ago, and there was a guy that was Spider Jerusalem, so he just had his shirt off and shaved head and all the tattoos, and
Right.
they were like, buddy, you can't come in here without a shirt on and get served. So I think he slipped a dress jacket on over top of it, yeah.
Yeah. Now, there was actually two of these versions made. I didn't know until recently. There's one where he comes with his cat, his two-faced cat. But then there was another version that came out.
Which is smoking a cigarette.
Right.
There.
Well, of course. But in the other one, he had his bowel disruptor in one hand, and in the other hand, he was flipping the bird.
Now the bowel disruptor is he has a gun that he shoots that makes you poop yourself. when he
Right.
shoots
You can
right?
do loose, explosive. There's like several different versions of disrupting bowels. So then, since I was such a fan, I took my personal laptop, and
Now that reminds me a lot of the Watchmen
right
that you have on your hat.
Now, what I have on my hat is a smiley face with a drop of blood running down.
Yeah.
That's from the comedian.
Okay.
But so I modified. Geeks, we modify everything. So I modified my laptop to resemble his laptop to the best of my extent. And then, of course, you have the books. They've actually broke these books down into like 3 major books, but they're like like $100 and something a piece. It's just nuts.
I wonder if anybody will ever buy the rights to that and try to make like a
Live action
series
thing.
out of it. Yeah. Because I think it would be popular.
Yeah, Warren
today.
Ellis actually had an actor picked out that he would like to have played. Cannot for the life of me remember who it was, though. If y'all know, put it down in the comments below. So, there's one other thing I want you to do. Pick out any comic back here. Any of these. Any of them.
Which one draws my attention most?
Yeah, well, just any of them.
Okay. I'll pick.
Because I want to show I want to show the fans this illustration.
I like
All right, now just say whoa.
Whoa.
Okay, so I want to show you the level of detail in these drawings. Now, in the first 13, every inch has so many details, it's crazy. In the later ones, there's the lack of detail draws your attention to some of the important things that's going on. But just
Derek Robinson.
I mean,
he's a fantastic.
oh
artist.
man,
When you get one of his panels, typically when you're reading a comic, you look at the panel, you read the word balloon, and you move on.
right?
With this stuff, you sit there and you stare at the
You go on
panel
forever.
because he's got so much detail in the background.
Yeah.
And as somebody appreciates comic book art, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy details in some of the things. Well, That's all I got.
You done?
I'm done.
All right, I think we're done.
All righty.